I always said, look, if you're not making mistakes every day, then you're not doing enough. You're not thinking a little bit more broadly. So you can't chastise people, put them in a box if they make a mistake. You got to say, hey, how do we empower you to learn from it and be a better person, be a better human, and help our clients more?
Hey, Daniel, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Yeah, love the name. Love the name. Watched the movie many times. It's classic. It's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, we're all in sales, right? At the end of the day, we're all salespeople, right? Influencing people to take right decisions in their business, finance, everywhere else. So you have an interesting career history. I was looking through. You started in the corporate finance, went to investment banking, wealth management, private equity. You're also an adjunct professor. Now you're a philanthropist. You have your own nonprofit, foundation, published author, and soon you're going to be a podcast host as well. So there's just a whole lot of things that you've accomplished. And I'm just curious to learn a little bit about all of that. So could you share a little bit with our audience your entrepreneurial journey, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, totally. It's interesting. So my brother is 6 years older than me. And when I was in eighth grade, he was at Northwestern. And I was always interested in business. I was always interested in business. My parents, as we talked about before, they're Welsh immigrants, came over to this country in 1959 with a small wooden box with literally all of their belongings. They have two pairs of underwear, a pair of pants, some toiletries, and that's how they started their journey in the U.S. But my parents were scientists, and my brother knew I had an interest in business. So when I was in eighth grade, he bought me a subscription to the Wall Street Journal. And they would throw the Wall Street Journal on our driveway, and everybody just assumed my dad was reading it, when in fact, 13-year-old Daniel was reading it. So I always had a propensity, an interest in business, in growing things. I always worked all sorts of different jobs growing up. I worked for some entrepreneurs. I worked for some big box retailers when I was in high school. And I caught the bug, really, my entrepreneurship bug in college. So I know you probably didn't think we were going to talk about college. But college, when I went to college, there were these erasable memo boards that you'd put on your door, and you would meet people by saying, hey, meet you at the co-op or meet you for dinner, whatever, on your memo board. And I looked at those things and they were really boring. They were just these white boards. There's no language on it. And I ended up meeting a guy who was a distributor for Anheuser-Busch in New Hampshire. And so I was talking to that guy about advertising and things like that. And I threw out the idea. I said, what if I created a memo board and you would put your logo on it, Anheuser-Busch. Think when you drink. That was the catchphrase back then. And I said, look, you get 1,000 new freshmen coming in every year, buying this memo board and seeing your brand. And Dartmouth is historically sort of a beer drinking campus. And he was like, that's a really good idea. So then I found an organization called Bryant Products in Roanoke, Virginia, who made the memo boards. And so I called them up. I'm 19. I called them up and I said, hey, how much does it cost to make a memo board? Plain memo board, 2 feet by 2 feet, the ones you sell on college campuses. And they said it costs, at the time, they're like, it costs $1.02. It costs $1.02. They're card, whatever, laminated. I said, okay, they cost $1.02. So then I go back to my friend at Anheuser-Busch. I said, what will you pay me to put the advertising on the board? And he goes, we'll pay you $2 a board. I'm like, okay, that works. So what ended up happening was I was able to make $1 per board before I even shipped it to the co-op for sale. So then I went to the co-op, the store in town on Main Street, and I said, look, you've got these boring things. There's like palm trees. I'm going to have a funny character, Anheuser-Busch, whatever. What are you going to buy these boards from me? And they said, well, we buy them for $5. I said, okay. And then you sell them for, they're like $8. I'm like, okay, perfect. So I ended up doing that for 3 years at Dartmouth. And just do the math on that. Thousands of boards a year. I made $6 per board, all in shipping. I ended up selling that business. I don't even talk about that, but since we're talking, I thought I'd mention it. ended up selling that business my senior year for a healthy sum. It was like $200,000. And it was a life lesson of accounting, of marketing, to your point, sales. And it was just about memo boards. Then my career started. I was an investment banker. I wanted to go to Wall Street. I'd been reading this Wall Street Journal that my brother had given me a subscription to since I was 13 years old. So I was always like, I've been reading the Wall Street Journal. I don't even know where Wall Street is. So I want to go work on Wall Street. I interviewed. So I ended up getting a great job at Kidder Peabody in New York. And I worked 100-hour weeks forever. So for the next 10 or 12 years, I'm going to skip over a lot of things here. But I was an investment banker. I was focusing on all sorts of selling businesses, buying businesses, restructuring of businesses, debt financings, equity financings, IPOs, secondaries, all of these things that you do. And what's great about investment banking is that it's an apprenticeship business. So you work as much as you humanly can because that's how you learn. It's not a 9 to 5 job, because if GE is going to hire you or Amazon is going to hire you, they need to know that you've been there and done that. And they don't really care if you're 22 or 62. They want to know that you know what you're doing or you can learn it and you've been there and done that, and that you're calm under pressure. I had a great experience. I was in New York, then I was back in Chicago, and then I moved to San Francisco because that was really the epicenter of technology and things like that. I also remember a good friend of mine, John Callahan, who's now at True Venture Partners, and he was a venture capitalist out of college. And we're in my apartment in Chicago. It's like early 90s, mid 90s. And he's talking to me about cookies and eyeballs. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've got my dial-up US robotics modem making that funny noise when you dial up. And I couldn't really follow the fact that people were tracking every click we would make, and they would understand our preferences of what we were doing. He goes, these cookies follow you around, and advertisers pay for eyeballs. So that got me thinking about, wow, the world is going to look a lot different in 10 years. And this was right before Netscape went public, right? So right before the first Mosaic browser actually hit the market so you can actually access the internet. This was probably a year before that. I worked with thousands of entrepreneurs. So whether it was Elon Musk or Peter Thiel or whomever, David Benoit, these folks that have these powerful ideas, either for PayPal or Salesforce or E-Trade, all of these incredible leaders, they were crazy. And to be an entrepreneur and to think that you could create something that currently does not exist, right? That takes an enormous amount of self-confidence, self-belief, and you have to be a little bit crazy, right? Because everyone is telling you you're crazy. You're working, and sleeping in the office, but you believe that what you're doing has an application, right? And it's going to change the world in some way, shape, or form, right? This is the world in which I lived for 12 years, interacting, talking to these entrepreneurs and these CEOs. And that just through osmosis made me want to be one of them, right? Because I told them about my memo board business, and they would be like, Daniel, I know you're an investment banker, but you're really an entrepreneur. You understand us. We speak the same language. You're as crazy as we are in terms of being passionate about what we do, and so on and so forth. My journey to entrepreneurship really started in investment banking. Even though I was advising companies, it gave you a really good sense of what made a good leader, what made a bad leader, why the importance of culture is so important. Companies that had a great leader but had a terrible culture, there was a disconnect there in some way, shape, or form. If you've got a great leader who empowers their employees and has a great culture, that's 90% of the game. Got to have a good product. You have to have a big addressable market, and you got to be able to sell it, right? So all those things have got to line up for something to be successful. And investment banking, the first phase of my career, was really extraordinary. I was really gifted, or blessed rather, to be able to work in San Francisco on that Internet 1.0. And a lot of companies that we took public, they didn't never made it, right? They'd go public, they'd flame out. But whether Linux and Red Hat took Red Hat public, all these companies that people don't really remember anymore. MicroStrategy, we took a company called MicroStrategy, which is now a cryptocurrency Bitcoin player. That was a ERP company way back in the day. I think that really honed my interest in building something and creating something. So I'll just stop there and then I can
Yeah.
launch into how did I actually make the jump. But any questions
Yeah.
around that, or what do you think?
Yeah, interesting story. Starting a $200,000 exit board company where you were already making money by having somebody else pay for the
Yeah,
cost of goods sold
yeah,
before you even sold it, and then you made a margin on it, and then actually able to sell that company before you exited the college.
yeah,
That's an impressive story. I think every college student should have some sort of a side project. I think
yeah.
so they can pay
And
their way.
I sold T-shirts. We ultimately did all these T-shirts for the football team, the volleyball team, the swimming team. So we had these funny top 10 lists on the things about the different teams. And then what ended up happening is it was really meant for the teams to wear them as funny shirts to say, hey, football, and then top 10 reasons why we're better than our competitors or something. And then everybody wanted them. And then I probably sold 5,000 T-shirts when I was there at $10
Yeah,
a pop. You just think about, and again, those cost like $2 to make. So you think
yeah,
about where the opportunities are, and I'm the person, Samuel, where I don't say why. I say why not? Why not do it? Why not give it a try? The worst case scenario is that it just flops,
try
right?
and fail. Yeah,
Who cares? Yeah. Then
yeah.
you learn and you move on.
I'm trying to get that to into my older son who's actually 13 years old. I've been telling him like you're under my roof. You can make as much financial risk as possible. You got nothing to lose
Yeah.
because you don't have to worry about rent. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to worry about anything. And I want him to try because I think I've interviewed over 180 entrepreneurs. Every
Wow.
single one of them told me something about their high school days or college days that they were doing something on the side. Like I met a
Yep.
guy. I'm trying to remember his name. He started his lawn care business in junior high, and he still runs a lawn care business. One of
Yeah.
his businesses that does like $40 million in revenue and has 40 trucks
Yeah.
and a massive commercial contracts. But he never stopped that business,
Yeah.
and he took the cash and built multiple other service businesses. It's just
Yeah,
crazy.
I've been fortunate to meet so many CEOs. I'm a YPO member for the last 20 years, so it's just a whole organization of CEOs and founders. And what I've come to realize, whether I'm in North Carolina right now, or from Chicago or Florida, or I was in San Francisco, there are so many businesses, right? You could be metal bender, you could be making lamps, you could be making plastic, you can making lights. The number of people I know, I had a neighbor in Chicago who made these little plastic frames, picture frames, that they're literally plastic. They cost like 5 cents to make. They just put them out, but they won a contract with a small company called Walmart. So he's got a $400 million business selling these like $8 frames, right?
Yeah.
Because not everybody wants a really nice frame. They just want a little frame, whatever. But he was able to scale it and figure out the cost per product and have the right distribution. So I never poo somebody. I used to in investment banking. You think you're the king of the jungle. You think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, we'll outwork you. We're in high finance, and you get in this sort of feeling that you're at the epicenter of things. And while you are, I think what I found is that the people that are really on the epicenter are the people running things, people
Mm-hmm.
creating stuff. And so
Yeah.
I was always like, this is good, but I'd rather be the client. I'd rather be
Yeah.
the client than the servicer. And then so one story that I think helps explain how I jumped from investment banking to pure entrepreneurship and founding a company. I sold a company in 1998 or something called Metamore Technologies. Metamore Technologies was an IT services company, and they were incredibly important in the late 90s, Y2K, and all these different people were creating websites. And Metamore was run and founded by a guy named Irv Shapiro.
Mm-hmm.
Irv was a blue collar guy from Niles, Illinois. He never really took a salary. when you go to meetings, I tell him, you got to get a better tie. You got to get the stain off your pants. He did not care visually how he looked. He was all about the technology. And we sold this company for $60 million of cash. And at the time, I thought he was like really old because I was I was my 20s. He was 37.
Wow.
So when you're working with clients like this, you talk to them every day, all day, every day. You're so close with them. And so he said to me, Daniel, I know this is a personal question. What do I do?
With
How
60
do I get the
million.
money? When I get the money, what do I do with it? And maybe we talked about this before, but I said, what do I do with it? Where does it go? And I said, I think we need to get you in front of a tax person, a wealth manager, and things like that. Long story short, I introduced him to a friend of mine, Chris Baldwin, managed his $50 million, and I got a small bonus at the end of the year. But that stuck with me because I realized that Chris Baldwin was impacting people's lives equally. I was helping create the wealth, but then he was helping to maintain and grow their wealth. And he was working 9 to 5. And so I
Yeah.
was working 6 in the morning to 12 at night, and he was working more 40 hours a week. And I said to myself, this recurring revenue model, SaaS model, and wealth management, there's something to that's really interesting. When the bubble burst in the early 2000s, we had Enron, we had the technology bubble burst, you had 9/11. We plunged into a recession. I really thought, do I go back and work at Morgan Stanley in New York, or do I start a business? And what I decided was, I'm going to start a business. And then from there, it was, what business is it going to be? And I knew that I wasn't a manufacturing guy. I knew what I was good at, and I was good at leading people, managing people. I knew I had a big network already at the age of 33 with CEOs and CFOs. I could talk their language. And I decided that I wanted to be the McKinsey of institutional investment consulting and private wealth, provide advice for a fee. And from there, picked a name, Sheridan Road, because I lived on Sheridan Road. And this wasn't without a bunch of people coming up with different names. And there was a name like Black Mountain Capital and Black Diamond. And it was either a diamond or black or mountain or something like that. And I said, hey, what about Sheridan Road Financial? And these ad execs, they've been storyboarding all these names. They're like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty good. So then I said, do I have to pay you for it? Do I have to pay you for it? Because I came up with the name. But anyway, that's basically that little vignette is why I said I want to start a wealth and retirement consulting firm.
Makes sense. Yeah. And so let's talk about that, because obviously you were able to build it, scale it, and exit it, which is most people's dream, is like to do that. And
Yep.
and then now you're also obviously helping many other businesses do the same. So how did you even know, obviously you were in the investment banking space, you knew most of the companies, like you saw those liquidation exercises where founders exiting with $60
Yep.
million and they don't know what to do with it. So like, how did you know going into it that was the plan?
Yep.
And then what were the steps that you took to make sure that you were able to set it up for that sort of an exit in the future?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. There's a couple things to unpack there. But the first is I wanted to be in a sector where I thought I could make a difference and build a business, and most importantly, build a brand. I really
Mm-hmm.
felt like there was no brand in the space. There was no brand in institutional investment consulting or retirement consulting. On the wealth side, obviously, you had Morgan Stanley, you had Goldman Sachs, you had folks like that, but you didn't really have a large RIA at that time. You didn't have any large wealth management firms that were independent. So it
Mm-hmm.
was really around, could I build it and scale it, build a brand,
Mm-hmm.
and be a thought leader? I thought being a thought leader, being forward thinking would be really important. So those are really the foundational things that we look to do. I ran it like business. Most of these firms, if you think back 20 years ago, were run like they were like mom and pop shops. They were lifestyle businesses. And I don't mean that derogatorily. It was a couple people, they had a nice book of business, they had good living, and they were happy, right? The thing is, that industry hadn't seen somebody like me coming before, where I'm like, I am going to climb this mountain, and the mountain's
Mm-hmm.
just going to keep going, right? It just keeps getting bigger because I'm just going to keep climbing. And so that's really what I wanted to do. We always wanted to be a national firm. Everyone was regionally based. I've got a big Denver company or New York or
Hmm.
Nashville or whatever. So the idea was we had a game plan. We knew how many clients I needed to win a year, what the assets would be, and what the revenue would be. I actually still have it on a napkin. What I
Mm.
wanted to do every single year by year, and I figured how many clients could I win and the revenue and things like that. So I also wanted to expand geographically. And there's some Harvard Business School case studies that showed that if you're in a million person MSA, a metropolitan statistical area, right? A city, basically. If you have a million or less people, there was some stats back in the day that said all you needed to know were 75 people in that city to be 1 degree of separation from everybody, or
Hmm.
2 degrees of separation from everybody. So you need to know the right commercial bankers, investment bankers, consultants, HR people, philanthropists, people running the botanic gardens and things like that. And so I really looked at the cities: Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Denver, Austin, Minneapolis, Louisville, Cincinnati, Nashville, Tampa. I created this list and I said, okay,
Mhm.
I want a concentric circle out from there. So I want to be close enough where they're saying, hey, I think I've heard of Sheridan Road, right?
Mhm.
I've been to Chicago. I've heard of that. I've heard of those guys. And even if they hadn't heard of Sheridan Road, they've heard of the actual road, Sheridan Road. So it was a little bit, I played a little bit of a game, so people actually felt like they had heard of the company long before that they actually did. So we just planned out a strategy. We wanted to be big. I knew exactly when I wanted to open the offices by year. And we tried to build a culture that was collaborative, it was fun. We gave back to the community. We started a foundation. We had volunteer days. We paid people well. So I think we really wanted to buy into, hey, we're changing the world and we're going to be industry leaders. And that ethos, I think, just catapulted us from where we were, which was zero clients, to over 1,000 corporate institutional clients and more than 3,500 individual clients. So it took us 15 years, right? Basically 14 years, but we grew to over 20 billion of assets, and we had 10 offices throughout the country. But that's really, it was just hard work. And I would tell you, when the Great Recession happened, 2007, 2008, 2009, I remember huddling up in the conference room and I'm like, look, everyone right now is down and out. Our competitors are down and out. We're going to work harder. We're going to pitch more. We're going to be that warm, fuzzy blanket for our clients. And we're going to ask them for more clients. And so I think that really was the game changer, because that period of time, I think we went from something like 300 million of assets to like 3 billion. And so
Mm.
by 2010, when the dust had settled, we started popping up on all these national surveys and rankings. Who is that Sheridan Road firm? Like, where did
Mm.
they come from? But they didn't realize that for those 3 years, we were working our butts off to be successful. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, it does. So obviously, like you said, like you had the strategy because you saw so many businesses. You took them public. You saw them how they scaled. They were
Totally.
driven with strategy, not like a small dream. Like they had big dream and vision, and they had a plan on how to go get it. And so clearly, you had that mapped out, including the markets. So you're going to open the stores,
Yeah.
locations in, and how you're going to penetrate
Yeah,
those.
I stole a lot of strategies from a lot
Mhm.
of people. So I
Okay.
basically took everything that I knew had worked, and we would go into, so I would go into a new market. I would go to Denver and I would
Mhm.
literally meet with the heads of the different museums of contemporary art, and I would meet with the head of the park district, and they would be
Mhm.
like,
Why?
why are you
Yeah.
meeting me? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I just want to get to know the lay of the land. What is so important about this community? What is, if you care and you listen to people, you'd be amazed at where
Mhm.
that goes. This is very simple, but if you care, you're a friend to people, and people knew that we were philanthropic even from the earliest days. And obviously, we have the Sheridan Road Charitable Foundation that has
Mhm.
blown up and it's done great things. But even back then, we were like, how can we help you? How can we help? We're going to be talking to a lot of people. So I talked to the head of law firms. We didn't even have an office. So I talked to the head of XYZ law firm in Denver. They'd be like, what are we doing? And I said, look, I'm going to have a big office here. We're going to have a ton of clients. I just want to make sure I know who to refer business to. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, yeah, love you, love your firm. So they would always be very nice and refer business our way. And I think that's what but I used to do that monthly. I'd go out there before we had an office, meet everybody, network, and then boom, we'd hire or buy somebody, and then we'd be
Mm-hmm.
off to the races.
Yeah. And obviously anything to do with the financial, like you said, it's a lot of relationship based.
It is.
And many of them, like when you look at SaaS companies at scale, they have an entire playbook on how they execute the sales process. So
Yeah,
did you end up implementing something like that from a sales strategy standpoint? Okay, we need to have a CRM. We're going to track all
totally,
the activities. We're going to measure the
totally.
outcome and we're going to double
Yep.
down on the things that work. So what were some
So
of the specific things that
we
you've
were
done?
always very technology forward leaning for sure. So whether it was the reporting engine in terms of the dashboard that had all the investments in it that actually we gave to the participants and to our clients, we were
Mm-hmm.
very forward leaning on that. In terms of the investment products, we created a collective investment trust in 2014 with
Mm-hmm.
InvestNet and Franklin Templeton. Very forward thinking. We had Salesforce implemented when people were like, what are you doing? I'm like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we need to track everything we're doing, every conversation we're having, so that we would know where the funnel is. I would know exactly how long the life cycle or the sales cycle was. Because usually,
Mm-hmm.
if you're just laissez faire about it, you'd be like, oh, if it takes 2 years, it'll take 2 years. So I'm like, no, I know it's going to take 3 meetings. So let's get those meetings scheduled a little bit quicker. We also did when iPads came out, we ended up buying like 50 iPads and we did all of our meetings on the iPad. So we
Mm-hmm.
handed out 10 iPads in a meeting and then we would go through the presentation. I know today that seems pretty basic, but back then it was people were floored by that. They're like, this is unbelievable. And it was those sorts of things, attention to detail, making sure that we were constantly doing the things that we needed to do that were really important. The other thing we did was we do a sort of a key event in each market, a social
Mm-hmm.
event. So, like in Chicago, we did this Chicago Cubs rooftop event. We'd have
Mm-hmm.
300 people go. So we would rent out a rooftop. We would go to the Kentucky Derby down in Louisville. We would go to Red Rocks in Denver. We'd do a seminar, take everyone to a Red Rocks show. We would go to what is that concert on the water in Milwaukee, Summerfest. We would do a
Mm-hmm.
Summerfest show. So we really people got to know us not just as their advisor, but they really got to know us personally. While it was only one time a year, they loved going. They know it was on our dime. And we were basically saying, look, we're giving back to you. Have some fun, get to know us a little bit better, get to know the whole team. And those things went a long way. We would have people in Iowa, Indiana come to those Cubs games and say, hey, I circled it on my calendar. I can't
Mm-hmm.
wait to go. So those are all little things that we did that really helped cement our relationship with the clients.
Yeah. What you're describing is like really creating opportunities where you could meet people and spend time with people. It's not the same as where you're just knocking on doors or making as many cold
No,
calls as possible.
no,
It's just to make a
no.
meeting. This is you're creating an environment where they're going to build a relationship and then earn the trust. And then when they're talking about money and how to invest their money is the natural next step. Oh,
Totally.
I trust the Sheridan
It,
guys, Sheridan Road
exactly.
guys.
And I think it really, and with the other thing that was great, we had all these different committees, people and culture, we had this, that, and the other thing. And it really, we empowered people to get over on the plank and make mistakes. We used to give out this little best worst idea, which is like my podcast celebrates the best worst ideas. Again, I took that from Sheridan Roads because we would give out these little Grammy statues or plastic, but it'd be like, we'd celebrate them at our annual dinner, say, oh, the best worst idea of the year is this. And he'd make
Mm-hmm.
fun of people in a funny way because I
Mm-hmm.
always said, look, if you're not making mistakes every day, then you're not doing enough. You're not thinking a little bit more broadly. So you can't chastise people, put them in a box if they make a mistake. You got to say, hey, how do we empower you to learn from it and be a
Mm-hmm.
better person, be a better human, and help our clients more? So then I'll just wrap up Share Road. So we basically, it was going to take 30, $40 million to continue to grow to 100 billion or so. And so we really looked at it and said, do we want to raise capital or is now the time to sell? That would enable us to do other things. And I think ultimately we found a great home in Hub International, fourth largest insurance broker in the world, a $35 billion company today. And it was a great home and a vast majority of our employees went there. We also, other groups went to other organizations who wanted to continue on as wealth managers. But it was a great outcome, and couldn't have been more proud of the team to get us there.
Yeah, it's just crazy. For Hub, it's another acquisition so they can add to their total portfolio value and say, hey, here's how much more we added this year as our total asset
Yeah,
under management. And for you, it's a very nice exit, right?
yeah,
And now you have the liquid cash to go invest into new ventures, which is what you've been on. So, which brought me to your book that you wrote, and you said you've interviewed over 500 entrepreneurs to write the
yeah,
book. And also, you mentioned you've had about 250 deals that you worked on,
yeah,
hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs. You helped multiple companies go public.
yeah,
You talked about speaking with Mark Benioff of Salesforce and Elon Musk and Sheryl Sandberg from
yeah,
Facebook and so many other
yeah,
entrepreneurial leaders. And you said one of the things was they were all crazy. But
yeah.
what were some other quality traits that you saw in these entrepreneurs that helped them succeed that you think other people should probably at least figure out how can they build those skills in them?
Yeah, no, I think leaders need to be. I was a big believer in conscious capitalism. This idea that you can do well, but you can also do
Mm-hmm.
good, right? You have to lead in the right way. You've got to build a business in the right way, and I think that's important because you win business, you lose business, and so one of the things I loved is that the people that at Sheridan Road who went off to do something else because their journey at Sheridan Road had ended. I'm so proud of the fact that we've got people that used to work at Sheridan Road. They're now running other organizations,
Mm-hmm.
CIOs of other huge businesses. And I love that. But I think the skills that I learned most are you've got to perseverance. These aren't, I don't think, overly insightful, but you've got to have meaningful perseverance. You just
Mm-hmm.
cannot give up. I think that the stick to itiveness of an entrepreneur is something really hard to grasp. And they are willing to be resilient, persevere, stick to the mission. And I think that's really important. I think hard work, I know it sounds old fashioned, but good old fashioned hard work. You're not seeing all these AI companies, they're not working 9 to 5, right? These are people that are sleeping in their offices. That's what we did in the beginning at Sheridan Road. Everyone was like working around the clock. They believed in the mission. But I think as a leader, you've got to empower your team to make decisions ultimately. So you can, by brute cult of personality, right? Those first few years, you could just put people on your back. I felt like I was doing that at Sheridan Road for the first 5 years, just putting people on my back. No one was working more than me. I was in the office
Mm-hmm.
7 days a week. And of course, I was an investment banker. I was totally used to it. They looked at me like I was crazy, but I was totally used to it. I loved it. I was just like, let's go, let's do it. And then after that, then I was like, okay, let's get all the right people in the right spots and empower them to make great decisions and things like that. Yeah, hardworking, resilient, stick to itiveness. And I think you got to also know when you need to empower people to grow and build their own teams. That doesn't mean you're hands off. This idea of letting go, an entrepreneur, most of the times they're very hands on and they can't get out of the weeds. I was in the weeds, but I just wanted to know what was going on. But they knew I had their back. They knew I was supportive. They knew that I would do anything to help the team. But we hired a head of marketing. We hired a chief investment officer, Chris Karam. We hired the head of executive comp, Chuck Williams. We hired a person to run Denver, a person to run this. And so you had all these different people. And so we basically said, look, we want you to
Mm-hmm.
run the way we run the business. But I didn't try to meddle. And if there were mistakes, we'd find the mistakes. But we really just wanted them to know that we had their back. And that's the only way you can really scale. Believe in the same mission, have the same culture, know that the client is first and foremost. And I think those are the winning traits of a great leader. Entrepreneurs are definitely crazy. They definitely are not wired the same way. I had a friend of mine, Bill Lederer, maybe I mentioned this, but he ran and sold a company called art.com way back in the day. And he always said that was amazing is not having the book written by the leader of a company, but have a book written by the leader's spouse. That he goes, get a collection of like spouses or partners to write a book about their
Mm-hmm.
partner running a business. That would be interesting because the sacrifices that the family makes to accommodate entrepreneurs cannot be
Mm-hmm.
underestimated. We see the public persona of these individuals, but they're not turning it off when they go home. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that nobody really talks about, right? We're talking about my podcast being looking at people's failures and making their
Yeah.
best worst decisions. Nobody talks about that. They talk about all the wins and successes.
That certainly it could be a series for sure, because
Yeah,
I've had entrepreneurs, right? I ask usually what are some regrets. Sometimes I have no regrets. But as soon as we stop the recording, they will then go on for 17 minutes telling me about some of the things that they
yeah, yeah,
wish
yeah.
they had done differently.
Totally.
And I think that's a common thing I've heard, right? There's a company I interviewed, it's Marketo, the
Yeah,
co-founder of Marketo, who exited. I think it was originally bought by Vista
yeah,
Partners, and then it was finally sold to Adobe for like $4.8
yeah,
billion. But that company was diluted so many times. By the time it was sold to Vista Partner, the co-founder had very small percentage. But then within 2 to 3 years, Vista was able to flip it and sell it for $4.8
yeah,
billion. And he said,
yeah.
whoa, how do they do that? But we couldn't do it.
It's crazy.
But then he was just sitting there, the remorse of having not had that same
Yeah.
success. But those are all regrets, but they don't necessarily want to tell you
Yeah, I
that
mean,
on camera.
but again,
But
I would encourage people. I said, make mistakes, just do it,
yeah.
because then you're going to learn from it. Fall flat on your face. We'll support you. Don't do anything like really bad, but come to me with an idea. And people don't. We talk about
Mhm.
it. I'd be like, I'm not sure, or I think that's great. Go run with it. But I think
Yeah.
that's having a good support system is important. You've got to have grace with people who make mistakes. You've got to support them. I think that's really
Mhm.
important for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're about to talk
And I
about the
was,
book. I don't know. Do you want to talk about the book?
yes. Yeah. So is there a big nugget? I know you wanted to give a free gift for
Yeah.
people who might be interested. So I'm curious to learn how they can request a copy. And also, is there some sort of a key nuggets from the book that you might be able to
Yeah.
share?
So I think the book, so this is the financial wellness mandates. We've sold about 100,000 copies of this thing. And what ended up happening was I gave a keynote opening speech at a conference in 2018, I think. And it was a couple hundred people. And I basically went through all of these different things around financial wellness, financial literacy, and the role of an employer and the role of technology and AI, and generationally looked at the demographics and how people in their 60s look at things differently than people in their 20s. And I went through this whole thing. And then I stepped down from the stage, and there happened to be an editor in the audience. They said, hey, that was really good. And we've
Mhm.
never heard anybody walk through these trends that are happening in the world and what the impact of those trends is, and why we're now faced with this massive financial anxiety in America. And they said, there's a book there. And I said, really? And they
Mhm.
said, yeah, we'll put you in touch with some publishers and you should definitely write the book. So that's what I did. And then I think it took me 18 months to write it. I did a lot of research. It's funny, it's humorous, it's an easy read. I'm supposed to give them a second book this fall. That's not going to happen, but we're working on a second book, which will be a bunch of interviews and people talking about their financial wellness journey. But I think the nuggets really are around our behavior, right? This is all about financial behavior and the behaviors that we
Mhm.
have that are impulsive, that make us buy things at the checkout line, make us have these impulse purchases. So really, the key to investing and saving and having a secure life is really around prioritizing the things that you need, which should be 50%. The things that you want should be 20%, and the savings has got to be 30%. So you always have to take care of the needs, take care of the savings. The want column, you got to really make sure that's in line with your budget, and utilize technology and utilize advisors and things like that. But it's behavioral finance is a big driver of how we make decisions, and I'm obviously a huge believer in how that affects how we save and invest in the world. Yeah, they can get a book. We can, if people are interested. I said we just give away a book. I could either have them reach out to you, and you could tell me if that's the easiest way. There's obviously a website, financialwellnessmandate.com, or they could go to bryantcapitalgroup.com, shoot me a note, or they can obviously just email me, drbryant22@gmail.com, and say, hey, I want a book. I saw you on the podcast, and I'm happy to just fire it off and send it to them.
Yeah. And in closing, I appreciate the offer to give those books away. In closing, obviously, you've had a lot of experience working with entrepreneurs, taking them public, seeing them exit, and you help create a lot of wealth. Looking back in your life, what advice would you give the younger Daniel Bryant?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think continue to take chances. The younger Daniel Bryant, I've done what I've wanted to do. I think I think lean into technology. I was right there in the very beginning of all of those companies. I think I could see leaning even more into technology at a younger age. I think that would have helped. But I think just really, I don't think I could have started Sheridan Road any earlier, any younger,
Mhm.
because it's really about advice. And sometimes you've got to really, technology is different, right? You could just have an unbelievable tool, app, whatever, that people don't care that you're 22 when they created PayPal, for example. But giving somebody financial advice when you're 22 is a little bit of
Mhm.
a challenge if you don't really have a relationship with money. But I would say just be there for your clients, be there for your family. I think my 20s, I can't really remember my 20s because I was on the road all the time. I think if I have a regret, it was a little bit of that. I didn't really lean into my family when I was in my 20s. But other than that, the advice would be work hard, stay the course, do what you want, do what you love. And one thing I would say is, and this is going to be one of my podcasts, sorry, is I definitely bought a couple of companies that I did it solely because they were financially good deals and the people were not a good cultural fit and it turned into a disaster. And so we ended up
Mhm.
having to unravel that, let them go. So there's a couple of those things where you don't do something purely for money. Do it because you love it. If you do something you love, then the rewards will come either in self-worth, self-esteem, maybe they're monetary rewards, but I would never do anything for the money. That's a
Mhm.
loser. That is a total terrible idea. So these people want to have a quick, hey, I'm going to do it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like what you said, right? You got to do some stuff before you can go give advice. I see people that are in their late 20s are giving advice on marriage and children and things like that. I see a lot of young entrepreneurs giving a lot of business advice
Yeah.
too, but they look like in their 20s. I'm like, how much have you built
Experience.
to
Yeah.
be able to give
Because
business
you gotta live
advice?
life. You gotta live life. You gotta make mistakes, and then from that you can actually. That's where character is built. That's where you can
Yeah.
actually dispense advice. But it's been a blast talking to you. I don't know if this has been
Yeah.
fun or not. I've had a blast. It's been
Appreciate
really
it.
good.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your life experience and lessons you learned in the process of building a company and
Cool.
obviously the career you built. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time
Okay.
today.
Awesome. Thank you.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.